Hey 2033, this is a video lecture for writing headlines and cutlines. Let me share my screen real quick. And I'll get the PowerPoint pulled up. And then we will get going. All right, so you should have access to the PowerPoint, this particular PowerPoint in your Canvas, so you can feel free to refer to it at any time. All right, so let's just jump right in. You're going to be working on an assignment where you're going to write some headlines and cutlines. So we'll start with the headlines. All right, so in this presentation, we say that a headline has 3 jobs. All right, the first one is to grab attention. So you want readers to read your work, and they enter your work usually first through a headline or through a visual, like a photo that goes with your story and the headline. So a headline really needs to get attention, but you don't want to be sensational in your headline. Like, you don't want to grab attention with something that is untrue or unethical. And so you can be very engaging and have exciting words in your headline, but just make sure you're not crossing over into the realm of being untrue in your headline. All right, so you want to grab people's attention. The second job we want to talk about with a headline is to impart information. So yes, get people's attention, but make sure you're not just getting attention, you're getting attention and giving them truthful and valuable information. So there's 3 examples here about imparting information. So the first 2 headlines here are very straightforward, what we would maybe refer to as a very basic news style headline. They almost read like a complete sentence, not quite, but almost. Fire destroys Norman tire store. Great. Destroys is a strong verb that gets attention. We know that there is a tire store somewhere in Norman that's been destroyed by a fire. That's imparting quite a bit of information for just 5 words. Same thing with the next headline. City Council approves roundabouts on Lindsay. That tells us the basic idea of that story. It's very informative. It may not be quite as flashy as some other headlines, but it's doing a great job of imparting information. The third headline is written in a bit of a different style. It is using some quoted information from a source that's in the story, right? So if you see a headline that's written like this, what it's indicating is that Obama said this particular sentence when he was being interviewed. So the headline reads Obama, and then you see the single quotation marks, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. All right. So this type of headline where you're quoting someone, it's doing both of those things. It's still grabbing attention, it's still imparting information, but it's doing it in a different way, kind of tapping into our emotions. But it's not the basic news style headline writing. And that's probably what we're going to focus on first in your assignment that you'll be working on. And do note, if you're quoting someone in a headline, the style is to use single quotation marks. All right, great. So let's get to that third part of a headline's job. You want to steer your reader into the full text of your story. So you want to give them a little something, right? Like, not just the most basic information, but in some way you want to lead them into reading like what's interesting about your story. So we have some examples here that are some different styles of headlines here. But if you have a headline that's like a how-to type thing, how to write a book in 7 days, that's steering the reader into the full text of the story because they know, hey, there's some step-by-step information here, and I'm not going to get it unless I start reading this story. Same thing with the last one. America has a huge stash of emergency oil, semicolon, here's why. Right, so we know that if we delve into this story, we're going to get some informative information about the why behind all of this, right? So those are the 3 elements to a really solid headline. Grab attention, impart information, steer the reader into the full text of your story. All right, good deal. Moving on a little bit. So headlines can be playful and creative, but keep in mind that uh, playfulness, wordplay, alliteration, rhyming, first of all, probably go with it in small doses. Like you wouldn't want every headline in your magazine, every headline on that day's web stories. You wouldn't want them all to be playful and creative. A little goes a long way. But also the type of story that you're writing about. If it's more serious in nature, typically stay away from the wordplay, the novelty, the rhyming. All right. If it's a lighter entertainment style, or kind of a news of the weird, that type of thing, those types of stories lend themselves more to this type of creativity, wordplay, rhyme, novelty, and headline writing. I really enjoy this one here under wordplay, the quarter pounded at McDonald's. I have no idea what that story was for, but the idea of like McDonald's has a quarter pounder, and so I mean, we have a very mature headline written here with Kraft and Who Cut the Cheese. But these things can be okay, depending on the type of story that you're writing, right? But if we have a serious story about a death, something like that, you're really gonna want to stay in a straightforward news style type of headline. All right, good deal. And again, a little goes a long way. This type of writing can get real cheesy real fast. And it also depends on the type of publication you're working for. All right. Okay. I'm going to let you guys take a look at these on your own when you're looking at the headline writing PowerPoint. And so I'm not going to, in the video, not going to go over these right at the moment, just some more examples of that fun, creative style of writing. There is one on here that I'm kind of thinking if I were editor, I wouldn't let it fly. The woman found dead with arrow in head. Maybe there's something to the story that makes it lighter, but that just seems a bit inappropriate. But something like, are you gaga for Google? Sure, we can do that. I enjoy that alliteration right there. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more about what you need to know about the language of headlines, okay, the headline jargon. So we get asked a lot as 2033 instructors, when do you capitalize words in a headline and when do you not? And that is not a straightforward answer. It's going to depend on the publication that you're working for. Normally, publications choose a style. They might choose to have a down style of headlines. This is when only the first word and proper nouns are capitalized. Everything else is lowercase. This is more like a regular sentence style writing headline. Now, if they use up style, that means that all of the words, except for articles, all of the words are uppercase. One is not better than the other. We might have our preferences, but it's usually just a stylistic choice that a publication will make. And you, as the writer, as the reporter, as the person who's been hired, you just need to know what the publication style is. All right. So then a couple of other headline terminology, a little bit more headline terminology that you need to know. So if you just have a single headline, right, that's just referred to as a headline. But oftentimes you'll see a headline that has a secondary headline underneath it. This can be referred to as a deck. Sometimes it's called a second deck. Sometimes it's also called a sub-headline. What I want you to know about that headline that comes underneath the main headline, no matter what you're calling it, deck, second deck, sub-headline, its job is to add additional information and not be repetitive of the main headline. Usually it's in a smaller font and has more words than the main headline. Okay, a hammer is a short phrase usually involving wordplay or alliteration. So think back to that creative headline writing. It's a short phrase, usually 2 to 5 words, and it grabs attention, but it can't stand on its own as a headline, right? So a hammer should only be used in conjunction with a full headline. Sometimes the hammer, it's usually kind of designed in an interesting way and it appears above or below or beside the headline. You see these a lot in magazine writing. They're in all kinds of publications, but you see them a lot in the design of a magazine page. But the important thing to remember is a hammer can't stand alone. It doesn't give enough complete information on its own. And remember that we're trying, one of the headline's main jobs is to impart information. Okay, then I want to remind you of something within this terminology. Sometimes we might say that doesn't count as a headline, that's a label. A label is when nearly all headlines, I might even go ahead and say all headlines, to be a functioning headline, need to have a subject and a verb, right? Kind of just, it's like a sentence. It's not a sentence if it doesn't have a subject and a verb. It's really not a functional headline if it doesn't have a noun and a verb. So if you had if you were trying to say that the phrase SGA schedule is a headline, it's not. That's just a label. Like, are you just listing out what the SGA schedule is for the semester? That's not a headline. There's no verb in it. But if you just add just 3 words here, SGA sets schedule, now you have a headline. It's not the greatest headline because it's pretty vague, but you have SGA as the subject or the noun, and you have sets as the verb. And so SGA set schedule is a functioning headline. Again, a bit vague. All right, so don't do labels as headlines. Sometimes a hammer is a label, but again, that's why it can't stand alone on its own. We'll come back to that and kind of look at some combinations here in a minute. So your instructor for 2033 is probably going to talk about some different types of headlines. We're not going to use all of these types for this assignment, but we'll be using some more of these types later on down the road, especially with an advertising assignment later on. So just be aware of these types of headlines. And there's examples here. There's the news headline, direct headline, indirect, a how-to. We see these a lot in like entertainment and magazine type of stories. There's a question headline. So yes, a headline can be a question. All right, it can be. There's a command style of headline. There is a reason why, or it can be kind of similar to the how-to. And then there's a testimonial. Now, let's see. Oh, here's another reminder here, right? If a headline, if a headline doesn't have a verb, then it's just a label. All right, so headlines need verbs. Good deal. So what I want you to think about with that, the 8 types of headlines that were on the previous slide. So some of those headlines are really pretty specific to certain types of writing. All right, so on that list of 8 styles of headlines, some of them are going to look really familiar to you for like advertisements, right? So I think example number 2 and example number 8. So number 2 is that direct style of headline, pure silk blouses 30% off. That's something that we would be really used to seeing in an advertisement. Number 8 is the testimonial, Michael Jordan wears Nike shoes. These are very commonly used in advertising. We're not probably going to be using those types in this particular assignment, but we'll come back to an advertising assignment later on in the semester, and you'll be writing some advertising headlines. So we want to go ahead and introduce that concept now. Other styles of the 8 are more like the type that you'll see appearing on news stories. Number 1 and number 5 specifically. So number 1 is easy to remember. The style is called news. Boren proposes tobacco ban, right? It's like an SVO, simple sentence kind of structure, all right? It's very informative, tells us exactly what the news story is going to be about. Number 5 is a question style of headline, and you're going to see those frequently in news stories. It is fine to have a question as a headline, but it's probably better if you learn the news style first, and then you kind of move on to the other types of styles. Some of the other ones on that preceding slide, numbers 4 and 7, those are the types of headlines you'll more frequently find in like entertainment style writing, magazine writing. So number 4 was the how-to, right? We see lots of how-to articles in magazines. We see lots of how-to articles in blogs, right? And then number 7, the reason why. Again, lots of like entertaining, fun, instructional types of articles in magazines, whether they're online or print, and in blog writing. So the question of what needs a headline, a lot of the stuff that we do in media writing needs a headline, but certain types of headlines are better than others depending on the type of writing we're doing. Something else you'll learn is that when we get to writing some public relations assignments, you'll see that news releases for public relations, those headlines are written very similar to if you were just writing a news story in journalism. So for now, for this assignment, we're going to concentrate on writing headlines for news stories. All right, so you're going to want to focus on that basic direct news writing approach. So let's go over how to do that. Oops, my numbers are kind of, they weren't all supposed to pop up like that, but that's okay. I'm just going to go with it. All right. So the first thing you do in how to write a news headline, which by the way, that is one of the examples of headlines that we just talked about, the how to. Okay. All right. You're going to, number 1, read the article, and you're going to want to read the whole thing. Okay, don't read just a couple of the paragraphs, right? Because there might be something at the end of the article that's important to the way that you write the headline. Fully read an article before you write a headline for it. All right, number 2, think back to that SVO assignment that we just had. I know it was everybody's favorite. Okay, think back to that SVO and see if you can write a very straightforward SVO sentence to serve as the starting point of your headline. Okay, so the example we're using here is, and I think the example on the PowerPoint that's on your Canvas might be slightly different, but it should be similar enough. All right, so you read this story, and from the story, this is your 1-sentence summary. A 5-year-old boy shot and injured his sister with his father's gun. That's like the thesis, the takeaway, the most important thing that you got from the story. Okay, we're not done headline writing yet, okay? Because the headline is not written exactly like a complete sentence. Number 3, you're gonna eliminate the articles, right? The, and, a. You're gonna eliminate the articles and end punctuation, okay? There's no period at the end of a headline. If it's a question headline, there is a question mark. But if it's not a question, there's no period at the end of a headline, okay? So eliminate those articles, and what you get is 5-year-old boy shot and injured sister with father's gun. One thing that you can note in headline writing, a comma can substitute for the word and. So you'll see that when we get to step 4 here, that I changed the comma, the and to a comma. It has the same meaning in headline writing. Step 4. Put verb, or in this case, there's 2 verbs. So put verbs in present tense. Headline writing is most frequently in present tense. There's some exceptions to the rules, but we'll talk about those later. 5-year-old boy shoots, injures sister with father's gun. Okay, now when we're at step 4, you're at, that's a perfectly acceptable news style headline. But sometimes you need your headlines to be a bit shorter, right? Like for design purposes, to fit within a certain space, okay? And this is actually, it's not as important as it was when we only had print media, but sometimes, you know, you have like, even in online media, you'll have this like one word dangling on the second line of your headline and it looks awkward. So you might have to sometimes knock out words in order to get your headline to fit the space you want. So step 5 is, if you need to cut down words, you know, work on that, make sure the headline still makes sense, but you may not need all of the words that you had in step 4. So here's some examples in number 5 of how we kind of knocked out some words to make it fit if we needed to go smaller and smaller. So we have 5-year-old injures sister with father's gun. Took out the word boy, took out the word shoots. Then we have boy shoots sister with father's gun, a little shorter still. Then if we needed it to be as short as possible, we have boy injures sister with gun. All right, so those are some examples. you'll notice in your headline writing assignment, each set of headlines we're asking you to write, take note that there are word counts we're asking you to meet. So like on headline 1, we might say, write this in 7 words or fewer. In headline 2, we might be saying you could use up to 10 words. In headline 3, we might be saying only use 5 words. Okay, so we're trying to get you to think of sometimes you need to trim down the headlines to make them fit. All right, and then I want to do a pitch again, reminder of that SVO order. SVO will help you write really concise, simple, clear headlines. So remember, SVO stands for subject, verb, object, right? Meaning the main subject, the main verb, and usually a direct or indirect object. In this case here, we would think of the SVO as boy shot sister or boy injures sister. But I do think that shot is the, that's the clearer verb. So boy shot sister. All right. So those are your 5 steps for writing a news style headline. All right, let's go back to that hammer and second deck, the types of headlines that were, there was more than one headline, that goes with the story. There's either a combination of 2 or 3, and they're all working together. So in the situation that we were just working with about the boy injuring his sister by shooting her with his father's gun, if we were to use all 3, a hammer, a main headline, and a deck, here's an example of a pretty decent way to write this, okay? So for the hammer, we have baffled and broken. There is no way that could stand alone on its own and people would know what the story was. And also with the single quotation marks are indicating this is something that maybe a family member said, right? So you read the story and somewhere in the story, it probably says, we are just baffled and broken by this situation, okay? So we're using the phrase baffled and broken as an attention getter hammer, but it cannot stand alone. Then you have the main headline, which could stand all on its own, boy injures sister with father's gun. Now, if you had if you had space and the publication that you're writing for likes a second deck, likes the additional subheadline, then you might be able to add something additional. Again, you don't want to repeat information, okay? So you don't want to mention again that the boy shot the sister. So we're adding a little additional piece of information to the reader that's in the story. Nurse neighbor hears shot, saves bleeding girl's life. Okay, that's something that we didn't know yet, but it's in the story. And if you have room for a second deck, you could pull that in as a sub headline. All right, so I gave you a little cheat sheet over here, combinations that work. You can have a hammer and a main headline. You can have all 3, hammer, main headline, and deck. You can have just the main headline. You could have a main headline and a deck. You cannot have a hammer and a deck. You can't have a hammer alone, and you can't have just the deck alone. All right, so there's a little cheat sheet for you. We're really, for this assignment, just writing the main headlines, but this other information will come in handy later. All right, let's jump over to photo captions. So the assignment you're working on is going to be called Headlines, Cutlines, and Tweets. Your generation is fantastic at writing tweets. So I'm really just pulling out the headline and cutline information for you here in this video. All right, let's talk about how do you write a photo caption. All right, so we're going to have you look at some photos in the assignment, and we're going to give you some information, and we're going to have you turn that information into a cutline. All right. Please note that cutline and caption are often used interchangeably, and that's perfectly acceptable. Technically, a cutline is one type of caption, but that's okay. All right. So how do you write a cutline for a news photo? Number 1, study the photo. Give it a good look over. See what's going on in the photo. Number 2, and look at the information that goes along with it, the written content that might go along with it. Number 2, write a complete sentence describing what the photo shows, okay? So we're gonna ask you guys to write 2-sentence cut lines, okay? So the first sentence, here's what should be in the first sentence and how it should be written. In the first sentence, you want to write it in present tense. ID anyone who's clearly visible. Give their names, titles if that information is available, okay? Check the spelling on all the names. This assignment is going to have a lot of names in it, all right? This assignment is where a lot of students get a fact error. You don't want that. Double, triple check each other's work. Make sure you're spelling all those names right, okay? Getting all the cities right on where these people are from, where the event is taking place. There's a lot of proper nouns to write in these cut lines, okay? Also, cut lines are complete sentences. So don't omit the articles. Don't get rid of the, ands, and a's. A cut line is a complete sentence, okay? So we're asking you to write 2 sentences per cut line. In the second sentence, write that in the natural tense. That means if it happened in the past, use past tense. If it's gonna happen in the future, use future tense. And then also make sure the second sentence is adding additional information. Don't be repetitive of information in the first sentence. Add additional information for the reader, okay? The second sentence should give additional little details. All right. Now, not all the captions out there in the world have to be 2 sentences, but it's very standard for captions to be 2 sentences. Okay, good deal. Now, I'm going to give you an example. This is the last. We're almost done with this video, okay? I'm going to give you an example of a good cut line. All right, this is taken straight out of the OU Daily. All right, so here we go. Oh, those rules that we just looked at. So look at the photo. We got some gymnasts. All right. The journalist has collected the details and the information and knows what they need to know to write this. So we have the cut line. Sophomore gymnast Allie Stern runs out of the tunnel before the meet against Michigan on March 6th. Second sentence, the event, also senior night, ended with #1 Oklahoma beating out #6 Michigan. Good deal. So what we see here is that first sentence is in present tense, runs, okay? The second sentence is in the natural tense. This was in the past. The second tense was ended, right? Okay. Another thing you'll see here is don't forget the photo credit, okay? Who took this photo and who do they work for? Photo by Josh Meyer, OU Daily. Then, if you already caught this, good for you, okay? What would make this caption even better is since you can make out Allie's teammate pretty well, like we can't see this girl's whole face, we can't see this girl's whole face, we got the back of the head here. Since you can see Allie's teammate well behind her, an improvement to this caption would have been to also have her named, right? Okay, so this is a perfectly good cut line. It's a very nice example. And that about wraps it up for the headline and cut line video. Hope this has been helpful and good luck with the assignments.